Hello and welcome to Industry Insights Sessions from Change in Education. My name is Amos Madra and I'm a careers advisor for Change in Education. And in this video, we get to speak to people about experts, in fact, about their own industries, and we get some advice that they can offer to you to help you in your future pursuits and whatever career it is that you want to go into. And if it is video, if it's radio production, well, you're in luck because we've got just the person for you today. My guest is Mark Gabler, who's a producer and writer in radio and has done lots of things. So just to give Mark, just to explain a little bit about Mark himself, Mark is an experienced producer, writer with various industry awards and credits, specializing in radio imaging, SPI, commercial, and podcasting. Mark started at Key 103, which is now known as the Hits Radio, in 1994. In 2004, he joined GMG Radio, which is now part of Global Radio, and worked on Heart Radio, which I'm sure lots of you listen to or know about. Mark started a freelance radio audio production company in 2014. Today, Mark is currently working at DevaWeb, and he's still very active in the radio industry and with lots of production. So we're going to get right in and get with the questions with Mark. Mark, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining us here today in our Industry Insight sessions.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes. Could you tell us a little bit about, yourself and what you do?
Well, basically, I work for DevaWeb, as you've said. DevaWeb's a company that does radio imaging and commercials and podcasting audio, and basically helps people with whatever audio they need to do whatever they need to do on the radio, basically. So we'll work with clients such as we work with the Nation Broadcasting Group, which is based in South Wales in Cardiff, and people and stations sort of all across the country, the likes of D Radio in Chester, Silk in Macclesfield, Uckfield FM down south, and various sort of stations across the world as well. We work with a few in sort of United Arab Emirates, people like Merge 104.8 out there, and basically they have a way to submit their work, their jobs to us, and we just sort of have a submission system online, and they just write out what they want. We'll make it for them. Basically, that's the basic idea anyway. Yeah. It's sort of audio on demand at its very simplest form. Obviously, we need to go into it in a lot more detail with them once they've briefed us. But yeah, we just produce remotely these days rather than sat down the corridor from an on-air studio. Yeah, we're in our own offices these days working, and obviously due to the pandemic, we're working remotely from home currently. Yeah, but, that's basically it.
So for those of you who are wondering what radio imaging is, basically in the simplest terms, Mark, I hope you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, it's the glue that puts a whole radio station together. So sometimes when you hear a presenter is...
anything that isn't a record or a presenter, basically.
Exactly.
So anything that says the station name, that sings the station name, that, that says a promotion, or it's all imaging is how you choose to say what you want to say on the radio, basically.
Exactly. So when you hear those nice little sounds and bangs that of say the radio station name, now you know what it is, and now you know the person that does it. So that's what Mark's job is, and it's a very exciting job. Could you tell us how you got into the radio industry and how the whole thing started for you?
Well, it started, I was around about 15 years old, and I joined a hospital radio station in Warrington called Radio General. I started off going around the wards asking poorly people if they would like to hear a record. So we went back downstairs then and presented a request show, or somebody else did at that time. I didn't get to do that till much later on, but that's kind of where you start out, and you're trudging the wards, asking people what they'd like to hear to make them feel a little bit better
Yeah.
there. So hospital radio was where it all started for me.
And that's really important, isn't it? I know that at the moment with the
It's
way
a good
things,
place to start. Yeah.
yeah. So for somebody who wants to start out in radio, what's the best thing for them to do?
Well, for me personally, it was there that it started, and obviously that's how I got interested. And then I did a course in Warrington. I didn't go very far at all because Warrington is where I live. But on the Padgate campus, it was part of Manchester University at the time, called North Cheshire College. Then it changed to Warrington Collegiate Institute, which is a bit of a mouthful, but there you go. I did 3 years there, media studies, business management, and IT. And there was a really good radio module there, which we got to learn how to edit on 1/4-inch tape. For that was the way at the time. There were no digital editors back then. We were out recording audio with Ewers, Marantz, the likes of that. And you probably have to look that up in a museum these days because they're not really in use anymore. But they were like portable recording devices at the time. And then you'd come back and you'd use a razor blade and a China graph pencil, again,
Wow.
look it all up, to do the editing on 1/4-inch tape. And I learned that way. And then obviously later on, it was all computerized, and and then from there, from the college course, I did a 2-week work placement at Red Rose Rock FM in Preston, which is where I eventually got my first job in the commercial production department, helping out there on the 1/4-inch tape again still. And that station was the first one that got the digital editor, which was back then, it was a very early one.
And that's still going today because that's the Hits Radio now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's part of the Hits network. It's still called Rock FM. So it's 97.4 Rock FM. I don't know whether they've renamed it yet, but it's part of the network, and it shares a lot of programming with the Hits Radio, which is Manchester.
It's had some huge presenters that have come from there that have gone on to national radio as well, Radio 1. Adele Roberts is one I can think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she was on there for a long time. She'd done Radio 1 as well, I believe. So, but yeah, it's a lot of people went through there. Chris Evans again was, he was
Warrington's very own.
He went to briefly to the hospital radio as well that I started on. Obviously not at the same time. I don't know him. I don't know him at all. But he was Timmy Mallett's T-Boy at Q103.
Wow.
Very early days, and obviously went on to do what he did, and do what he still does. There's quite a few. And we went through that.
How much has radio changed from when you started to where it is today? I know that you mentioned this briefly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's all gone a lot more. It all been consolidated to within an inch of its life now, hasn't it? So where we used to have a radio station in most towns, these days they're all kind of swallowed up into the larger companies like Global Radio and Bauer Radio, and they're the two big main ones. And obviously there's the BBC as well. But yeah, there are a lot fewer sort of local stations and more networking these days. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it's changed. But, there are still sort of smaller community stations popping up here, there and everywhere, which we like to be involved with and like to sort of work with. And, the larger groups obviously have their own sort of in-house services for most things, including imaging. They have a really good imaging team there based, the Bauer team based in Manchester and the Global team based in London. Both have really good guys working for them as well. So we have to kind of do what they do, but for the little guys that don't have their own facility.
Yeah.
That's kind of our sort of remit at DevaWeb. We kind of work with the guys that come to us for help and do what the big national teams do, but on a smaller scale for their budgets and their briefs, and try and make them sound as great as we can.
So when you're doing these imaging for, say, some of these radio stations that are abroad, what happens in terms of the language? Do they tell you? Do they translate it, or do you have to learn?
Often we have a lot of pronunciation guides floating around on things. I mean, you'd be surprised, because a lot of the stations that run in other countries are often English language stations.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of it is. There are still things that are local to them, that have that use the local language. So obviously you need certain words sort of phonetically spelled out, or they'll record a little thing on the phone on Messenger, the little Messenger app that you have on your phone, and they'll record exactly how you say it, and then we can pass that clip on to a professional voiceover. They're usually really good at mimicking these pronunciations and can usually get them right first time. So a lot of that happens where we're not sure on pronunciations, and the basic rule is, if you're not sure, just ask. And I mean, we've long since got over the embarrassment of not knowing a Welsh town, because we do a lot of production for a group in Wales called Nation Broadcasting, and they have a lot of sort of Welsh town names that are, sorry, I haven't got a clue. Could you please either spell that phonetically, or they usually have no trouble just saying it into a phone and sending us the clip over, and then it's no problem. We can just get the voiceover to have a go, and if it's not right, we'll try again. We just try again until we get it right. So it's in some ways is a long process, but you do get used to it.
How important is podcasting in your industry now?
Oh, very. I mean, it's a different form of communication, isn't it? It's not live as in the radio, not as immediate, but it is still a very useful form of communication, in that you're allowed to be a little bit more prepared. I guess you can do them live, I guess, can't you? You do your own podcast, so I'm sure you're very much aware of this. But I mean, you can do them live, but they're usually sort of in a store afterwards on a podcasting app, and downloadable, and you can listen then at any time. So that they need the same sort of imaging as any radio broadcast would need. So they obviously, some of them would want to sound as super professional and slick and tight as a normal radio station, and some of them are a bit more rough and rugged, and obviously people have their own sense of aesthetics, so they'll polish it or not as much as they like. So all of the tools that are available to radio are also available to podcasters.
You mentioned about these the three main broadcast organizations, the two commercial ones, Bauer Global, and then of course BBC. And obviously you can see, especially with BBC, that podcasting is a huge feature for them now, especially with their BBC Sounds program. Would you say you find more people, companies coming to you requesting for you to work on podcasting on radio, or is radio still the main outlet?
I would say it's probably, I would say at the moment, it varies from period to period, obviously, in different times, and it's probably around about 20%, I would say, of our work sort of is with podcasters, and imaging for podcasts and the like, and it can obviously, it swings and roundabouts. It depends what different people are doing at a different time, and whether they come and choose to work with us or work with someone else. It's it does vary, but a lot of our radio clients, the work is a little bit more regular, so we obviously spend a lot more time doing that these days. And DevaWeb has a sister company called Ignite, which is the jingle side of things. So obviously we do jingles partnered with an American company called TM Studios, which my boss is involved with there. So a lot of the jingle stuff could be either for a podcast or for a radio station, or even these days commercial jingles as well as another avenue that they pursue. A lot of companies will buy their own jingle and use them in their commercials, and we do a lot of that too. So it really is varied.
Yeah, and even within supermarkets as well. You'd be walking into your local supermarket, and you can hear there's a radio show going on. And
yeah, Super Drug Radio. There's Spark has a radio station. Even the Midland, not Midland Bank. Goodness me, they've not been called that for years. HSBC has their own.
Has their own, so on.
Playing as you go in as well. And a lot of them are live too. So
time checks.
Absolutely, yeah. They take it really seriously, don't they? It's all there, isn't it?
Exactly, and it all needs imaging.
Of course it does.
What makes a good producer? What makes a good producer writer like yourself?
Well, thank you very much for that. What makes me, my parents? I don't know. I just keep doing what I've always done. Really, it hasn't really changed much. You look at a brief, you look at what a client wants, you try and get inside what their thinking is and what their ultimate goal is, and you try and make it sound as spectacular as you can, or not. Sometimes they come to you and they say, this needs to be humble, this needs to be showbiz, this needs to be, and you try and achieve what they want to achieve with their projects. Basically, each new job is a new brief and could be done in a whole new way, and there are a lot of people working in sort of radio voiceover land, and each will achieve a different sort of sound, and a lot of them are very versatile too. So the number of different directions you can go in is almost infinite based on who you work with. So you basically have to just keep your mind open and be willing to think it all out and write it all out, and then ultimately make their project sound as good as they'd like it to. If that makes any sense.
No, definitely. So get the brief, make sure it's accurate, and follow the brief from start to finish, and give the customer what they want, because it's all business, isn't it?
In any
industry,
service industry, totally.
The customer's always right.
Absolutely, yes. That sort of lives out as that lives and breathes in radio production. Absolutely, The customer comes to you with a request, you talk it through with them, you go away, script it out, make it, hand it back, and hopefully they're happy. And that's the nuts and bolts of it, really.
So would you say hard work pays off, or
I mean, as much as you would call messing around with sound effects and music and voiceovers hard work, I mean, yes. I mean, you need to sort of learn the craft initially, but I mean, that's I don't think it's changed for me for a long while now. I'm pretty much doing similar work to what I used to do back in the late 90s at Key 103, just for a just in a changing world, in a different role, and working from home these days rather than from the nice luxurious studio I used to have. And I'm not using 1/4-inch tape anymore. I'm using Pro Tools, which is again a lot more technologically advanced, but it's still essentially doing the same thing, just inside a computer. And I don't cut my fingers as much with the razor blade. So, you know, swings and roundabouts.
You clearly enjoy what you do. What would you say is the best part about your job?
The variety of work you get to work on. I mean, just looking at, I'll just move on to our project list today, and I can see I've got some Christmas IDs to work on. I've got some sweepers to make for an Asian station in the Midlands. I have some more Christmas stuff to do for Dubai, and I have some sponsor tags for Chester's D Radio to make later on. So, you know, there are quite a few sort of avenues we can go down, and our list of sort of projects are quite varied, and I really enjoy that. I like the fact that we have a lot of different things to work on, and not all of it is essentially making audio. So if you lump it all in together, but the variety that is within that is amazing, and I enjoy that.
What tips and advice would you offer to somebody who wants to do what you're doing?
Basically, be as helpful as you can. Always be up for doing new things and trying out things, and you know, being keen is really the key to it. And you know, being a positive person and being someone who doesn't mind. I mean, there's a lot of jobs that when you're starting out are not the best jobs, but if you muck in, roll your sleeves up, get it done, and you know, and it's all a learning curve, isn't it? Really, because if you have to make it, if you have to make 120 10-second sponsor tags, you'll know perfectly well then after that amount of tags how to do a tag, you know, and you'll know what that entails, and you're basically always in a position when, as you climb in the ladder, that you're taking a job that maybe somebody else doesn't enjoy quite as much, but you might like, you might not, and eventually you'll hand that on to somebody else, because obviously that's how the cycle goes, and new people come in all the time, and you know, but the point is, always be positive, always be keen to learn, always be keen to kind of take on the jobs, and always be the person that they rely on, because that's how you get more work, and that's how you get involved and sucked in and become needed and become a valued member of the team, and this, that, and the other. That's the way to get in, because ultimately, you know, you're trying to make yourself, you know, needed and wanted, basically. And the more positive you are, the more likely you are to be wanted and needed in a team.
Absolutely brilliant. And how can people learn more about you and what you do, and what final words would you want to leave our audience with?
Well, learn about me and what I do. Well, I basically just work in a production company and make audio. That's it. That's all. I mean, there's more to it than that in a more detailed level, but in a nutshell, that's basically what I do. How they can learn, they can go on to DevaWeb.co.uk and check out all our info there. You can see what we do, who we work with, who we all are, and there's a number of people that work in the company that all do different things, and you'll see where I fit into that if you wanted to learn more about that. But yeah, I basically came up through the various radio stations you mentioned at the beginning, the Rock FMs, the Key 103s, the obviously that the Q103 doesn't exist anymore. It's the Hits Radio now. But Century Radio again doesn't exist. It turned into Real Radio, which is now Heart, and that was the point. So I'm just the product of that whole progression, really. And obviously these days we're doing a similar thing within a private company, but working for a lot of different clients. And you can see all about that on DevaWeb.co.uk and find all that information there.
Wow, Mark, thank you so much indeed for taking this time to sit down, tell us a bit about yourself, and inspire so many people who want to go into the industry that you're in. And I think the key things for you guys to remember is be keen, be positive, don't be afraid to roll your sleeves up and mock in and get stuck in, and hey, you've seen what Mark's done, why not you? So that's it from me. Thank you very much. And that's it from my guest today, Mark. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Amos.